One of my ministries was cutting out felt sets for Sabbath schools and elementary schools all around the world. I have cut out probably close to 200 felt sets over the 55 years of our marriage. We established a felt fund that people could contribute to, and I cut out the felts and gave them to many churches around the world and in the Philippines. Felt sets at that time were $100 for each set, and now $400. One Sabbath, the family gave me $100 to buy a felt set for a church in the Philippines. I took the money home and laid it on the kitchen counter. Sunday morning we had company, we visited, and then I went to the kitchen to work on fixing a meal. As I walked by the counter, I looked and realized there was a pile of money sitting there. I counted it, and there was $200 there. I talked to our guests and asked them if they had added $100 to the money already sitting there, and they said, no, we haven't even left the living room. On Tuesday, I deposited the $200 into the felt fund at the Village Chapel SDA Church. A couple weeks later, I checked with the treasurer, and he told me that $300 had been deposited into the fund. Wow. So I asked him to send a check to Faith Adventures that supplied the felt sets, and then they would ship me the 3 sets. When I received the box of felt sets, there were 4 in the box. I called Faith Adventures, and they told me that they had received a check for $400, so they sent me 4 sets. I called the treasurer of the Village Chapel Church, and he told me I have the returned check in my hands, and I'm looking at it right now. And it is made out for $300, and on the memo line it says it is for 3 sets of felts. Amazing how God can multiply money for his work. $100 became $400. Praise the Lord. Amen. When God Doubled Our Money by Jack Nash. Excuse me. It was Friday morning when my phone rang at my office. It was a friend from my Sabbath school class. He was calling to say he wanted to help with the evangelistic meetings we were going to be conducting excuse me, in the Philippines the next week. Excuse me. He said he wanted to give us a personal check for $2,000 to take with us for the expenses of the meetings. A team had been doing pre-work, and there were expenses for the meetings themselves. We always paid for our own airplane tickets, so any funds that were given to us would be totally used for the purpose they were given for. He said he would give it to me at Sabbath school the next day. I thanked him greatly. However, I had to point out that our plane flew out Sunday evening, and there would be no way I could get the check cashed before our departure. He said he would work it out. The next day, he handed me an envelope with $2,000 in cash. I placed it in my Bible case and thanked him again. When we arrived in San Pablo City in the Philippines, I opened the envelope at the dining room table of Pastor George and gave him the $2,000 in cash. His wife, Bing, always paid the bills and gave the receipts. I forgot about the money and didn't worry at all. I knew we would be taken care of. The fuel for the jeepney would be paid for, the food, the accommodations, the travel expenses of others who came to help with the meetings, music people, handout materials, and t-shirts for the newly baptized, identifying that they were baptized and when and the name of the meetings. My Bible case was coming apart and needed to be sewed. I took out my Bible and other papers, sermons, etc., and gave it to Pastor George, who always took care of the details. Friday night, the last night of the meetings, Pastor George gave me the newly sewn Bible case after the evening meeting. I took it back to the room where we were staying, and after reviewing my next day's topic, I went through the sermons and papers that had been in my Bible case as I put them back inside. It was then that I noticed the envelope our friend had given to us filled with $2,000 in cash. I picked it up and felt of it, expecting it to be empty. Instead, it was full. Yes, full. It was full of money. I counted it and found $2,000 in cash. I couldn't believe it. We thanked the Lord, and the next morning as I sat next to Pastor George on the platform, while the offering was being taken up, I leaned over to him and asked him if I had given him the cash for the meeting expenses. He said I had, that he had been spending it all week on the expenses for the meetings. I said I was sure I had as well. However, the envelope was again full of cash. We finished the Sabbath morning divine worship service at the San Jose Mindoro SDA Church and had a beautiful baptism by the oceanside in the South China Sea. The next morning, we loaded our things and ourselves into the jeepney and headed back to San Pablo City. Nothing more was said about the money. However, when the jeepney came to a stop, instead of immediately helping to unload and get our luggage off the top of the jeepney like he usually did, Pastor George went directly to their apartment and returned in a minute with the rest of the cash in hand that was left over from the $2,000 cash I had given to him before we left the South Central Luzon Mission headquarters. It is only in connection with our work in the Philippines that we have experienced such miracles. How does the Lord fill an empty envelope with US dollars after an envelope is empty and you're in another country? The Lord has 1,000 ways to provide for us, of which we know nothing. Again, praise the Lord for what he chooses to do to let us know that he is with us while doing his work. So now, what to do with this special money, miracle money? This is a picture of Eleanor. I'll start from the left. It's Daryl, Eleanor, Dario, Nashi and Keith, and Xavier. We had visited Sir Dario and Mom Eleanor Benavides, teachers at Lawson, many times, held seminars, evangelistic meetings there more than once. Mom Eleanor told us one night that their son, Xavier, the one on the right, had a fever and diarrhea, and nothing she did helped. This picture, I don't know who the little girl is, but the second one is Cherry's son, Wes, and Daryl, and the last one is Xavier, and this is the size he was at the time of the story. Some of the Mundian children in their village, Mom Eleanor told us one night their son Xavier had a fever and diarrhea, and nothing she did helped. Some of the Mundian children in their village had had the same symptoms and died, 7 of them. Mom Eleanor was not going to risk that happening to her son. It was already dark, the sun was down, and she was not willing to risk waiting until morning. She took Xavier in her arms and started to walk to the hospital 7 kilometers away. She had to walk rough dirt roads down the mountain with no streetlights, but she was determined her Xavier was going to live. After some hours of walking, she arrived at the hospital, and Xavier received the care he needed in the Palomar Community Hospital. We remembered this story and knew we needed to have a small jeepney built for emergency service from the village of Lawson to the hospital. The little jeepney had its engine, a 16 horsepower lawnmower engine. It meant that it did not need to be licensed. Yet, it was strong enough to climb up and down the mountain roads to Palomar, serving the needs of the almost forgotten tribal people of Lawson. We already had funded the building of a full-size jeepney, which we named the Bread of Life. A little side note here, this is a picture of the jeepney arriving full of people to attend our evangelistic meetings. I counted 65 people who got out of and off the top of this jeepney. Amen. This new little jeepney was a much smaller version, so we called it the Pandasol Pandasol jeepney. Pandasol is a small bread roll sold along the streets of the Philippines, thus the name meaning small bread roll jeepney. This need was supplied by the miracle of the doubled money. God does work in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. Praise his holy name. Amen.